Hi, Natalie. Natalie, so I like to walk around a lot. Is that going to cause a problem with that?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you everyone for coming this morning. I did teach school and I taught in Council Bluffs. I taught over at Longfellow, so some of you may know that school. It was very fun. My name's Barbara Egger, and I thought this morning, I know we're creative people. I know in this group we have potters and poets and painters, ooh, alliteration. And I know that we have gardeners and textile artists. We have photographers. We have all kinds of people who make things here. But if you're feeling discouraged at all, like maybe 2025 didn't really pan out as much as you had hoped it had, or maybe just frustrated a little bit about what am I doing? Maybe today in this next 10 or 15 minutes, something will come to you, and I hope so. That's my hope for all of you, that it was worth your time. Okay, so first of all, I want to thank the committee for allowing me to come and speak this morning. To me, this is a big deal. It's a global community. I'm very impressed with Creative Mornings. Thank you very much. And no, not yet. Okay. Is anybody? So this is my husband, Emmett Egger. He's wonderful. Such a nice person to come and support me this morning. So would you raise your hand if you've lived in Council Bluffs, Bennington, around the Omaha area for a year? Would you raise your hand? Keep your hand up if it's been 2 years. Maybe 5? 10? Your whole life, maybe? Yeah, that's me, except the first 6 months. And as you know, I went down at the passageway, and people come in, and when you say you're from Omaha, and a lot of times, you know, they're on their way to the airport or on their way just coming in. But over and over and over, I hear, man, I came to this area. I was prepared to go home and make jokes. It's great. And I always say, don't tell anyone. Okay, so I grew up around 32nd and Woolworth, around the Hanscom Park area. We watched President Ford's house burn down one morning during breakfast. And so I was a change of life baby, and this was my grandmother. She was born in 1895. So in 1919, women were allowed to vote. Back when she went to school, if you were a girl, you had 3 choices. You could become a nurse, you could become a teacher as long as you weren't married, God forbid any hanky-panky went on and you got in the classroom, or you became a homemaker. So that was what she did. She left school, you were done in 8th grade. If you were going to be a homemaker, you were done with school. And she was a writer, she wrote stories and poems, and she was always worried that she would not spell a word correctly and be considered illiterate or not as educated. And so we had this dictionary that sat on our kitchen table at all times. I remember being in 5th grade, and the word was bus, B-U-S, and she said, no, bus has 2 S's. So that was why we used the dictionary, was to disputes like that and figure out how to spell words. When I got to be 12, I remember her opening that dictionary and saying, there was a line drawing of a frog with, can you hear me okay? Thumbs up. A frog with a lily pad, and her saying, why don't you see if you can draw this? And she gave me a pen and brush and some ink, and that was really how it all started for me. She was a good grandma. She was kind of crabby sometimes, but she was pretty good. She sat in the corner. She was the original neighborhood watch, and from her perch, she could see what was going on in the neighborhood. And she organized a sewing club, all the little girls in the neighborhood. She taught us all how to embroider, and she was the president. And she drugged me along to Billy Graham revivals as well as her stamp club. And so anyway, that was it. So this was our family. I was the mistake that turned into the blessing, unless you were that kid and then you didn't think so. Now, he doesn't have those memories of grandma and poetry, something about a spatula and being chased with it. So go ahead, the next one. So these are words I remember from her. It says, trees stood as black lace at sunset. This is on a page with the word silhouette. Anyway, she sat with me and wrote poetry. Her words remain forever in my heart. So that's kind of a little tribute to her. My brother, that one you saw, owned that typewriter. He made sure I brought it back to him. So some things don't really change. Anyway, so I'm here this morning, and Corso, creativity. Hands up, has anyone heard of this book, Big Magic? Yeah, it's just so great. If you haven't read it, just give yourself a gift. It's written by Elizabeth Gilbert, and she's a writer, and that's what she does. She writes. She just writes every day, every day, every day. She defined creativity as the relationship between a human being and the mysteries of inspiration. Isn't that beautiful? So she believes that we have an energy. I do too. You know, I have an energy, you have an energy. Sometimes you meet somebody and you just connect. I mean, you just feel like you know them, or you want to know them, you want to be friends with, and sometimes it's the other way. It's like polar opposites, like, we're never going to be best friends. And that one that talked about the plants and the therapy, you were behind me, I'm sorry. Okay, you. She believed that plants have an energy. You probably do too. I do too. They grow. And Elizabeth believed that our thoughts, that inspiration, possibly could have an energy that's kind of floating around there. You know, that's a little woo, but maybe, who knows? Anyway, so have you known people, it just seems like they have this charmed life. It's like, oh my gosh. And how does that work? You know, did they just get dealt this great deck of cards? So what I'm doing right now, I've defined inspiration. Now I'm going to talk about how to court that spark. And so fan the fire. So I thought about this, and here's a few things you don't want to do. If you're trying to find the inspiration to come up with something new, or if you're a writer, you know, to write that book or whatever it is that you make. The Eagles, I think it was, you know, hearts are your best friend. How's that go? The Queen of Hearts, always your best friend. So the first thing you don't want to do is compare, because that is just a joy killer. So the second thing would be imposter syndrome. You know, I mean, who am I to be talking to you? I taught first grade, and so, but, you know, who am I to call myself an artist? Those negative messages, Elizabeth Gilbert said, she was the writer, she said she would, if she was blocked, she would go in, wash her hair, put on makeup, dress up, put on high heels, everything. I mean, she really, you know, just told herself that's what she needed to do to be able to write. And I have an apron in my studio, and I put it on, and I tell myself, okay, now I'm going to be an artist. So the next one, negative people. You know, I was lucky, I really was. My family embraced the idea that I was artistic. They liked it that I wanted to write poems and play the piano or make music. They thought that was just great. I had a friend, and I was at her house one day, and she had a couple girls. The girl was a teenager, and some boy had given her a bouquet of flowers, and she had dried the rosebuds and taken a little push pin and made a heart above her bed. And we opened the door. My friend said, "Look at this." And we went, you know, we peeked in. She wasn't there. We peeked in, and there's that heart on the wall. She goes, "What the heck?" I said, "I think it's kind of cool. That's pretty creative." But, you know, in that family, that was not cool. That was not, you know, there was no support for that. And maybe that was your case. Maybe in your family, you know, so maybe sometimes you hear those voices. So this negative people thing, when I'm creating something or I have an idea, I don't really talk to my family about it. I mean, they're wonderful. I know they love me. But I have what I call my tribe. And find your tribe, people who you can show the ideas to if you're stuck. You know, they make a suggestion, or when it's all done, I'll show them, and they're very kind to me. But they'll say, you know, maybe a little more contrast down in that corner, or they'll say, you know, that looks great. Okay, let's see. The next one is perfectionism. Some people wear this as a badge of honor. I'm a perfectionist. Well, that was never my problem. But so some of the things that perfectionism can get in the ways is the right supplies. You know, I can't write because I don't have the moleskin notebook and the $35 pen or whatever expensive pens cost. This is what I do. I say, I just need that block of time, 4 hours of uninterrupted. Why? Why do I need a block of time? If I have a half an hour in the morning, work for a half an hour and then get on with it. Sometimes it can be a studio, Only I could be at Harvester Loves. If only I could be I could create if I had a hot shop studio. No. If I had a studio in my home, I could create. So whatever that is, get a corner. Make a corner for yourself and get started. This is probably the biggest one for me. So, okay, go ahead. So there was a show. Okay, so I went to school. I got a commercial art degree. I didn't know anything about marketing. I didn't do very well at all about that. And I knew I was artistic, but as far as making a business, no. Then I became a teacher. When first graders don't listen, if you draw on the board, it's very effective. And they will, the concepts, they get it. So I did that for quite a while, and then I became a substitute teacher, and then I had more time. I had more time to create. And so this is a painting I did, and there was going to be this show in the Omaha area about Lewis Carroll, Alice in Wonderland, and I thought, oh, that'd be fun. I'm going to try. And there was some hesitancy, and when you're kind of new getting in, that rocks your confidence. And so for me, I call it God. Some people might say higher power, the universe, a muse, whatever. It just so happened I had this painting out. The person in charge had decided, okay, we'll let you be in the show. But the neighbor came over and she's like, what is that? And she said, I want that. I'm buying that. I want to buy that. And, just that look for those little nuggets along the way, those little signs that you're on the right track. Okay, so I got to go in the show. And then this was huge. This was a huge painting. It was a big pain to take it down. I don't know if this happens to anybody else, but so many times when I'm in a show, the corners are still wet. I don't know. And so it was all over my car. I mean, it was a deal, and I was crying. I thought, why do I even bother with this? This is so discouraging. I take all these paintings to these shows and nobody buys anything and they don't sell. And do you know, I was hanging it up and one of the artists that was in this show came over and she said, would you consider being in a gallery? She said, I'm in the passageway and we're looking for an oil painter and I think you might be a good fit. And if I wouldn't have gone down there and if I wouldn't try it again, I wouldn't have met her. And anyway, so, okay, so I got in the passageway and that's really great. Passageway is great. You get to be in the front window once a year. How many people have been to Yellowstone? Keep your hand up if you've been to Yellowstone before 1914 or 2020. Oh, haha, everybody put their hand up. But before 2014. Raise your hand if you've been there before 2014. Okay, see, nobody goes to Yellowstone before Yellowstone got popular on TV. I had this show, nobody knew about Yellowstone. It is far from the Omaha area, 1,000 miles. But like I said, anyway, so you got to be in the front window once a year if you're in the Passageway Gallery. Isn't that great? You can do whatever you want. Whatever you want in the whole wide world, whatever you want, just pick out an idea. And so I thought and thought and thought. And then I got this and I thought, what about that dictionary? Remember that dictionary so long ago and how she'd encouraged me to draw? And I thought, what would it be like to draw on the picture? What if I painted A through Z, my favorite things, not if it would sell. So A was for autumn, and B was for butterfly, and C was childhood, and D was dragonfly. So right here, see this dragon up there, or that little dragonfly? That's the kind of things that she would find. E was for elephant. This is the kind of thing that she would ask me to draw. Anyway, I was for impressionism. I did the whole alphabet, but I'm just showing you a few. And this is the Omaha skyline. Then S was for strong. And that looks like our granddaughter. And it took me a really long time to figure out those feet. And it was at church, this lady crossed her leg, and I thought, that's it. So anyway, okay, and then the last one that I want to show you is X is for I love you. So, okay. So the important part, rather than ask yourself, will it sell? Flip the card over and say, do I want to make this? You know, I really appreciated, I've been here a couple times now. Last month it was Jewel Rogers, you know, she was the Nebraska poet. She was so amazing. And the month before was Richard Harrison, and he talked all about public art. You know, I mean, those are, to me, those are big names, and I really appreciate you letting me come this morning. There's a book called Imagination. I bought it for myself when I missed a flight, and I had to sit around for a long time, and I thought, I'm going to celebrate. And in that book, they talked about, when do people have their most creative thoughts? And it was when you first wake up in the morning, when you're taking a shower, or before bed. Because there's no this, and there's no distractions. So those are times to keep in mind. So we've defined what creativity is. We've learned about the negative things that can not nurture creativity. And finally, I want to tell you a story about my daughter. She was in high school, and so this is how I know this, because she was best friends with somebody's daughter. And he was a teacher at the high school. He taught science. And you know, when you're teaching, it takes a lot of time. It's really a profession and blah, blah, blah. It takes a long time. But his creativity, what made him feel really, this is the why of the talk, okay? Why bother? That what made his life come to have meaning and to really, really make his heart sing, make him feel alive, was he liked to plant walnut trees. And so they bought some land in Iowa, and the girls and he and the family went over and planted some walnut trees. And then a year later, they went back and they planted more walnut trees. And then a year later, you get the idea. And so every year they would plant all these walnut trees, and they would look at the little walnut trees from the year before and how much the walnut trees, and it was he just loved this. And it was what was going to pay for the graduations and then the weddings and then eventually retirement. And so that's what we're talking about. I'm talking about today, is to give yourself a little bit of time and try to figure out what is it that you really, really, really enjoy? What makes your heart sing? The reason why living your best, most creative life is important is because it's kind of, hold your hands up, Stephanie. It's kind of the sparkle in life, you know, the glitter on the shoes, you know, the frosting on the cupcake of life. There was somebody I know who was a photographer, and she liked old, dilapidated buildings. And I said, well, that's kind of cool. She said, yeah, I don't think they'd sell. I said, well, if you enjoy it, you should, you know, take pictures of those. So it takes a lot of courage to do what it is you want to do. You know, they might not get it, they may not like it, but that's okay. You know, I mean, it was hard to bring that buffalo to that show, and so Elizabeth Gilbert said, "You have treasures hidden within you. Hunt to uncover the buried jewels." That's your creation. There aren't just a few lucky people in life. Figure out what it is you like and then go after it. You know, that teacher had a job, but he made time to plant those walnut trees. So, in review, we talked about the definition of creativity. That's the human and the mysteries of inspiration. We talked about how to stay away from that negativity, the things that kill the creation of your inspiration. And so, finally, this was painted on the page with the word possibilities. I hope today you have found some ways and found some encouragement to go out and start living your best life in 2026. Thank you so much.